I am Jeffrey St. Rose. Welcome to Enter the Poetic, a contemplative space for illumination. Enter the Poetic is a space devoted to the shapes of language and the resulting radiance. Any great poem leaves the reader with a sense of acquired illumination. For me, poetry is an exploration of consciousness and ideas. It is an intentional energy, like a spell, cast with specific frequency signatures that impact with multi-layered meanings for resonant experiences, opening internal journeys the spirit can traverse on its way through this strange eternal universe. I share my original work with the hope that it adds to your imagination and inspires the light within you to come into a more focused glow. How do we, in this fast-paced world, create spaces for spontaneous awakening? Now, with Pluto in Aquarius, a new change is developing, one that overturns old paradigms in order to create something more authentic and original, rather than rely on the usual status quo, top-down constructs for our information and meaning, which can only get us so far. The poems in this episode center around this theme. My intention with each episode is to share my poems that connect in some way with the monthly zodiac sign and its attributes, in order to synchronize with these greater cycles and flow with the current energies. Over my years of writing, I had only composed a handful of rhymed verse poems, thinking them perhaps a bit outdated, too constraining, or even too difficult to make interesting. But in 2022, I decided to write a full-length book entirely consisting of rhymed verse. Through that project, I began to appreciate the challenge of writing within a prescribed structure in a way that didn't sound forced or inelegant. This first poem consists of 10 lines with 10 syllables in each line, and divided into 5 couplets. What strange awe! Human souls, in their tragedy of forms, change by strangeness and not by common norms. It is a sudden act of the abstract, or a transcendence beyond the mere fact, that frees the consciousness for the sublime and brings bright experiences through time. Give the world a color from your face, something to waken and shimmer the space. For what strange awe do we all live under, as still the gods must be touched by wonder. Strangeness is a way to enter the other, and in the other we find a necessary nourishment that inspires further exploration. As the opening of the poem states, we change through strangeness, not through anything usual. It is the unknown that surprises us, a sudden act of the abstract, which brings the revelations that eventually move us on to the next phase or age that will teach us something new, offering opportunities for greater self-realization. This poem guides us beyond mere facts into something transcendent and more creative. While certain facts may be useful in establishing foundations, they can often be fabricated and manipulated or distorted for certain control agendas. It is really through our own experiences that we come to truth for ourselves, while also understanding that truth is fluid and can change. What we once thought true may no longer be true for us as we evolve into higher states of awareness that supplant what we knew before. As the poem indicates, our consciousness is then freed for the sublime, which allows for bright experiences through time, which means that when we are open, we are able to receive more of what is already there and use that to progress forward. When we look beyond what we are fed and told to believe, we free ourselves from the agendas of others, and, as well, we free ourselves from solid ways of thinking that keep us trapped in the same mental frameworks and routines. And isn't this the tragedy of forms the opening line refers to, this being locked into certain beliefs or behaviors that create limitation and repeated stagnation? Our consciousness is always meant to evolve and expand. We are meant to share what we learn from our expansion. As the seventh line says, give the world a color from your face, meaning to share authentically from your lived experiences and what you have directly received from the truest place within. By doing this, we cause an awakening, something to shimmer the space, as in bringing in more light for advanced awareness. This sharing is continual and meant to be ongoing, as the last couplet implies. For what strange awe do we all live under, as still the gods must be touched by wonder. We live in a dynamic cosmic system. No matter where we are in our evolution, there is always more wonder to behold, more miracles to embody. Sharing our unusual experiences helps others stretch their capacities and ideas of what is possible. We are here to discover this strange awe the poem references. We do this by continually inhabiting new conceptual spaces that change the way we think about ourselves and the world. When we wonder, we create questions, and questions are openings for experimentation, which then creates learning and understanding. The next poem is also included in my book of rhymed verse poems. The Matter of Thought. Is there only space and time, and an occasional rhyme? Or is there something beyond, to which we now must respond? Has a way between the clouds opened into what surrounds? There is a rift in the air that rustles the everywhere. It is the matter of thought that will determine what's brought. Where are all the divine dreams in forbidden color schemes, the ones that shock with their light because the tones are too bright? Is there a silence ahead for us to mystically tread? We can retreat or advance in this remakeable dance. What is the name of the force that still keeps nameless its source? Is there only space and rhyme and the illusion of time? Or is there nothing at all, so we can rise up or fall? The quick 7-syllable lines of this poem are playful and light-hearted, in noticeable contrast to the serious tone of the poem and the questions it poses. The playful rhythm and simple end rhymes, delivered in a whimsical way, invite in a childlike curiosity, perhaps making it easier for the mind to absorb and ponder the short bursts of questions and concepts. Right from the beginning, the poem asks, is this all there is? What we already know and understand? Or is there something more that is calling us on? And of course, the answer is yes, there is something more. That something is beyond what we are already experiencing. The poem is inviting us to respond to that, giving examples of what is noticeably new. The speaker in the poem asks, has a way between the clouds opened into what surrounds? Often when we first notice something different, we question it, not fully understanding what it is or its impact. It could begin as a new feeling or a spontaneous thought that makes us aware that a difference has occurred, even if we aren't yet able to identify it or ascertain its relevance. But we sense that all is not as it used to be. Something is there that wasn't there before, a new pathway that opens into more of what is already there that we didn't know existed. This pathway is something higher and no longer terrestrial, as it's a way between the clouds, an entrance into another dimension, perhaps? The speaker seems to confirm this by providing the first statement in the poem. There is a rift in the air that rustles the everywhere. No longer is the speaker questioning if there is a difference, but is now remarking that there is one. This difference is more tangibly felt by the senses, as it is described as a rift in the air that is directly experienced and is impacting the current terrain, rustling the known environment, shifting it in yet unknowable ways. This may temporarily create an uncertainty of change as things are stirred and rearranged. Whatever it is, though, how you choose to work with it will determine your experience. As referenced in the lines, it is the matter of thought that will determine what's brought. How you choose to perceive it, and the level at which you understand it, will dictate how it operates in your life. If you choose to positively engage this change, your experience will more than likely be positive. If you resist the change or negatively react to it, then you'll most likely create a negative outcome for yourself. Thoughts create reality. We manifest what we think, whether consciously or unconsciously. These lines are reminding us to be conscious of what we are thinking and drawing into our lives, as that is what will create our realities. The next two couplets, where are all the divine dreams in forbidden color schemes, the ones that shock with their light because the tones are too bright, are asking where are all the higher ambitions to create something magical, something that may even be too far out to truly understand in this moment, but is exactly what is needed to progress us forward, as it challenges us to think outside the normal means. Perhaps it's an inspirational piece of music, visual art, poetry, or sacred geometry form that draws us into a higher awareness, opening consciousness into other realms. The use of the word forbidden implies that the content may not be wanted by certain sources or organizations, since it could challenge and change the status quo and may be outright rejected because the work doesn't fit within a prescribed commercialism or current mode of thought. The poem goes on to ask if there is a silence ahead for us to mystically tread. These lines, coming after the previous one about the tones being too bright, suggest that the light mentioned comes with a sound, and that sound acts as a catalyst for expanded awareness. Often, after such an experience, there is a pause for reflection and integration, so the silence being referred to is an inward acceptance of that light and sound catalyst, and now it's time to sit quietly with what has occurred in order to find the most beneficial way forward, and in a way that is mystical, which is a movement into a more transcendent territory. We always have a choice in whether or not we decide to respond to something. That choice point often returns, and we can always choose to go in any direction, as stated by the lines. We can retreat or advance in this remakeable dance. We can either regress or progress, and can remake ourselves at any point along the way. Our lives are not static. We are always deciding which avenues to pursue. Retreating is not necessarily regression, although it can be, but it could also be a going backwards in order to find a different path, or deciding not to choose something at this given moment because it isn't the right time. These lines are a sort of threshold, asking whether one chooses to proceed or not on a perhaps unusual and mystical path. The speaker of the poem then asks, what is the name of the force that still keeps nameless its source? The question is one of wanting to know the ultimate spiritual source and identify it in some tangible way, although it may always remain intangible or unknowable in some way. These lines lead the speaker on to the next questions, which then end the poem. Is there only space and rhyme and the illusion of time, or is there nothing at all so we can rise up or fall? Here the opening lines are reversed from is there only space and time and an occasional rhyme to is there only space and rhyme and the illusion of time. This reversal changes the placement of time and rhyme, echoing the opening lines and then expanding upon them, as now the speaker, moving further along the thought process, is now pondering whether or not our constructs and experiences of time are illusory and not real after all. As the further into a mystical awareness we tread, time becomes irrelevant and is viewed as just a temporary construct of this third dimension. The speaker is seeing beyond into a more timeless state of being, and then even asking if any of it at all is real, as evidenced by the final lines, or is there nothing at all so we can rise up or fall? If nothing is really real, then we can go in any direction, creating our reality however we choose. We can ascend or descend, moving back and forth between extremes for experience and learning. The ecstatic matter around us. After the stacked cataclysms, we made an eternal language from the shredded wings of angels, each feather an invincible letter, imprinting its glow on the ether until it burned into an invisible presence, scarring us with raw stars, a galaxy-shattering urge to speak beyond our understandings, so that we would have to evolve universes over eons just to comprehend one shimmering sound of the words that continued to split us, even as they resurrected. Our forms collapsed in moonlight over the luminous stretch our longing had caused, reanimated from the timed oscillations which reverberated our purpose, yet still in awakening configurations, silenced by the tight cut of the light that lifted us, beam bleeding and whole, toward a supreme destiny spelled out in the ecstatic matter around us. This poem is a single sentence which seems to imply that the entire experience is happening in the blink of an eye, in a quickened transfiguration. Each line brings additional information about some sort of resurrection after a post-apocalyptic experience. Its primary theme is one of triumph after a collective dark night of the soul. There is a sense of having gone through deeply challenging times only to use what was left to create something even more beautiful than before. Taking the shredded wings of angels and forming an eternal language is an act of not just hope or victory, but a spectacular new beginning that brings with it a higher way of being. It isn't a remaking of the past, but creating something entirely new that is at a higher level of consciousness. As I often say, it's the struggle that creates the strength. I think I even decided to use that line in a poem because it captures the essence of rebirth and evolution, where, after we have triumphed over some obstacle, we are even stronger and more empowered than before. This new language the poem talks about is now the new foundation of this way of being, with each feather being an invincible letter that imprints its light on everything and becomes an invisible presence, something that does not need to be seen but is felt and understood as this new solid foundation. This language of light is divine and leaves its physical marks, scarring us with raw stars and words that continue to split us, as the poem says. Still, there is more evolution to undergo before the transformation is complete, since this language is compelling a new way of speaking that is beyond previous knowledge, amplifying an awareness that more work needs to be done to fully comprehend the higher meanings as evidenced in the lines. To speak beyond our understandings so that we would have to evolve universes over eons just to comprehend one shimmering sound of the words that continued to split us even as they resurrected. These higher meanings break apart old mental constructs and ways of being as simultaneously they rebirth. And the experience intensifies the more one understands the shimmering sounds, meaning more light is able to be comprehended as consciousness expands. This intention to change has caused this rebirth, and in a divine timing that has revealed this was the purpose all along. These lines speak to that sentiment. Our forms collapsed in moonlight over the luminous stretch our longing had caused, reanimated from the timed oscillations which reverberated our purpose. The collapsed forms represent a surrender. This is a surrendering to what was previously desired that has now come into being because the timing is right for it to happen. This surrendering has created a rebirth, a reanimation, which is now echoing this higher purpose to evolve. However, there is still more to understand. The poem concludes, yet still in awakening configurations, silenced by the tight cut of the light that lifted us, being bleeding and whole, toward a supreme destiny spelled out in the ecstatic matter around us. These final lines show how the transformation is still in progress, in awakening configurations, compelling additional contemplation. The light is so strong that it has cut and silenced the mind, but only because it is showing the way forward into a new realm, a supreme destiny that is now available. Even though the place ahead is already made, we still have to navigate the remaining terrain in order to successfully arrive. The main themes of the next poem, The Gilded City in Between, are rebirth and recognition. Once we have reached a certain level, it is time once again to empty the self and be open for the next journey. If we are already full of too many pre-existing ideas of reality, we may not be open enough to receive an even higher and more expanded awareness that has come in to replace the old one. This is how we consciously build the self, by constantly receiving and releasing. The theme of recognition centers around the realization that we already have everything we need if we stop to look around and discover it. We are always given exactly what we need in the moment and just have to recognize that, shifting our perspectives in ways that allow us to see more of what is there that we can utilize for the next step on the path. The Gilded City in between. Walking with ragged rhythms, we reached the Gilded City in between the self already created and the one who must be born, alone in the foreign absence that exists only to dissolve what has previously evolved to its expressed destiny. So we must be emptied yet again, never-endingly again, for what is above that has always been within, which is what we have been seeking as we traveled the road to what we thought was our golden home, not knowing we were already there. When you feel you are in between one place and the next, uncertain of where you are going, take some time and see what is around you that will guide you forward and serve as inspiration for this new direction. The motion of questions. If the motion is square, the questions get lost in the corners. It's the danger of angles that breaks the continuous praying. None of the answers are stacked, but are always collapsing what we think we have grasped. Revelation is paired with paradox. We already are what we seek, yet must always keep seeking. To translate the pages that cannot be seen is what we are here to accomplish, not by thinking but being, both brought by and beyond answers. If the motion is halted, the questing gets lost in the questions. Only the circle can keep spinning what needs to return to be seen. That poem is from my 8th book. My friend Joanne has said that the poems in this book rearrange the pebbles in her head. That is a very poetic and apt way of describing the poems in this book, as they are quite conceptual and nonlinear, challenging and expanding our ways of thinking to activate new neural pathways and multidimensional thought forms. This poem, like the others in this book, inhabits more of an abstract landscape, where more work is given to the reader to decipher the lines and interpret the layered meanings. But it is also useful to view the poem as a whole and not get too lost in literally deciphering each line, which is only one way of reading it. This poem is meant to be read with both the left and right brains. On one level, there is concrete information for the left brain to absorb, such as the reference to the geometric forms of the square and circle that seem to anchor the poem in place as it shifts around, exploring the contrast between them and the greater understandings to be gained. The lines reference each of these forms, shifting back and forth between them, which can be seen as the fixed and the open. The motion of the square is rigid. If we stay too long in fixed modes, then we lose spontaneity and risk the dangers of angles that can limit the fluidity of being. On another level, the poem ventures into abstract ways of thinking that open new conceptual territories. None of the answers are stacked, but are always collapsing what we think we have grasped. These lines are a great example of what my friend Joanne said about the poems from Book 8, rearranging the pebbles in her head. What we thought we knew is always being replaced by the new, and this does indeed cause a great rearrangement of thoughts and ideas. The moment we think we understand something, then, in a way, we have limited it and fixed it in our minds as something immutable, when in truth our understandings are always expanding, if we allow for that. The answers we seek are not always given in a linear fashion. They often arrive when we least expect them, and sometimes when we don't even desire them, as we feel satisfied with our current way of being and don't want that to change. Even when we do want to change, it can be challenging, as the new information is often at odds with what we previously believed or understood. The lines, "We already are what we seek, yet must always keep seeking," mean everything is already inside us, but we still have to keep working to discover it and express it in our own unique way in order to translate the pages that cannot be seen. We must make the invisible visible by finding and accessing our intangible divinity and then creating something material with it. Accessing formlessness in order to create form. The solution is usually found in its opposite. This way of being creates a natural flow between polarities. The poem continues. If the motion is halted, the questing gets lost in the questions. Only the circle can keep spinning what needs to return to be seen. Sometimes we can pause our progress by getting too lost in questioning everything to such a degree that it keeps us from moving forward, or we stop because we cannot see the way ahead, which may cause doubt or uncertainty. What we need to know will resurface, often in a new way, so it is prudent to trust in that and allow evolution to unfold in a natural way. We don't always have to know the answers before proceeding, as often the answers can only arise once we have started blindly down the path. Remember, revelation is paired with paradox. Messages of effort. Between the glow of below and the soul's knowing what it owns, between the torn and bending toward, beyond what is worn, the storm-blackened forms. From before the blink of beginning, tense with the clenched horns of the unborn. From the long pall, the pale call, from the fallen figs twist and wither, the wish for water in the west, between the fire's need for embers and rest, or vines for the deep wine of the kiss, between the rhyme and the time, from the thrust to trust the air, when the unwary air inherits the god's stare, between these and other things, a light undreamt against the emptiness, undreamt emptiness against the light, the road going into no, between lemon leaves and refusing the moon, the unfound sound around the flower's crown, from what the whale ear remembers in the fear of the sea, divinity killed by the soft slipping of will, from what is lost that only the gold knows, why the heart imprisons its prisms, equal elements enslaving the day, invaded by too much saying between the colored planes of the voice, offering praise on the altars of song. Among carbon and crystal, the solid mind still turns against learning the Ankh's properties of awe, from reaching being, between the laws of sun and suffering that move clouds upon the body, messages of effort enter, with the wings thinking, between iron and sleep, make space for radiance. Taken from my 9th book, which focuses primarily on sound, rhythm, and cadence, this poem carries a simple message: make space for light. It's a long-worded way of saying create openings for expanded illumination. Subtle openings are created in the space between things. By allowing these gaps between experiences to expand, more presence is able to enter, and with more presence, more awareness is generated. So often we move from one experience to the next without pause, which can lead to distraction or scattering, where a breath is needed to reset before moving ahead. It's the breathing between things that opens a space for contemplation and reflection, providing the spontaneous information we didn't even know we needed, but eventually realize is critical to our soul growth. Beyond this singular message, there are micro-meanings inside the lines that allude to what understandings may occur from the result of making such a space for radiance. The lines then operate as possible directions for conceptual pursuits and act as avenues of inquiry for the mind, pointing towards all sorts of potentials. For example, the road going into no, a line that suggests oblivion, is paired with lemon leaves, which represent growth and optimism. This pairing of opposites is also found in the lines between the torn and bending toward. Here, there is stunted movement from the word torn, contrasted with the motion to advance with the bending toward. As well, the solid mind is still turned against learning the Ankh properties of awe, which is a way to say the physical often has difficulties accepting and interacting with the metaphysical. The Ankh is a symbol of immortality that the finite mind often finds hard to grasp. Additionally, the line, invaded with too much saying, opposite the colored planes of the voice offering praise, reinforce the struggle between polarities, where the too much saying is a reference to unnecessary and meaningless chatter versus an intentional vocalization for harmony, celebration, and meaningful rituals using chants or songs as a way to connect with the divine. The line pairings, beyond what is worn, and the storm-blackened forms echo this opposition as well, where beyond what is worn has connotations of wholeness, where storm-blackened forms are heavy and dense, perhaps unconsciously so. The storm-blackened forms are also contrasted with the blink of beginning, tense with the clenched horns of the unborn. The unborn would most likely not have any forms, but yet are said to have clenched horns, as perhaps they know that being born is a struggle, and they are already prepared for that. What is formless already understands the struggles of form, but seems eager enough to keep entering form as another way of individualized expression. The opening lines, between the glow of below and the soul's knowing what it owns, suggest that there is some kind of hidden light as yet unknown that can be gained. Is it a volcanic glow within the earth, or a secret internal illumination that is just out of reach? Some esoteric knowledge that is available if only we pause to look? And will making space between these two ideas bring that light into what the soul knows that it already owns, adding to it? This poem is perhaps one of my most challenging ones, as it is abstract in a stream of consciousness way, where each line keeps leading into another thought. I could spend a whole episode just on this poem alone, unraveling its many embedded details and compounding levels of symbolism. Yet, beyond all the layered lines, it is an invitation to balance opposites and make space between them to bring about a greater awareness. This universal principle of balancing opposites to create unity is a dynamic way of how we learn and continue to evolve. Keep in mind that first and foremost, a poem is an experience, one that is subjective and individualized. It is meant to engage the senses and evoke an inner response that opens space for illumination. Thank you for listening, and make for yourself a great life.